Welcome in, Spread and Subs Daily Gambling Show. We are here, we are live. 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific for another episode of Spreads and Subs Daily Afternoon Gambling Show. Before we get into how we did yesterday, shout out to Bet Openly for sponsoring the show. Bet Openly has the best odds in the game. Sign up with Bet Openly through the link in the YouTube description. Deposit $50 and send me proof on Twitter at JReedNBA. That's JReidNBA on Twitter. Send me proof and I will be able to enter you into a giveaway for some cash. That's JReidNBA on Twitter. DM me that you deposited $50 into your Bet Openly account and I will be able to enter you into that giveaway. Shout out to Bet Openly for sponsoring the show. All right. Moving on here to how we did yesterday. Yesterday was not fantastic. Another average day, back-to-back days going 5-5 on the bets total and going 1-2 on the best bets, which sucks. I mean, we've had some days where we go 3-7 on total bets, but get two of the best bets and go positive. We've had days where we go really positive on the total bets, but still finish 1-2 because of our best bets. So it is what it is at this point. That's why I highly recommend. If you want to take my best bets, are always going to be the three I'm most confident in, but obviously within range. Like I'm not going to take Celtics plus 40 and be like, oh, that's my best bet. But regardless, go ahead and look at the full 10 bets. I'll have them all on the screen on YouTube. If you want to take some and not the others, who cares what the best bets are? Do that because most of the time we're not going to have a bad overall record on our 10. But moving on here, we will start. Just to recap really, really quickly, 3-2 on NBA yesterday, 0-1 WNBA, 2-2 MLB. That's for 5-5 overall. So, moving on here to our first bet of the day. We have 5 NBA bets today, 1 NHL, 1 WNBA, and 3 MLB. So 4 sports today. Loved it. I think this is probably the first episode. This is episode 13. I think this is the first episode with 4 different sports. So, pick and choose what you want. But moving on here, first pick, Pacers plus 9.5. I think it's moving towards 8.5 now, but 9.5 is still doable. Celtics are 0-2 in these game twos in the playoffs so far. They had quite the scare in game one. That game they probably should not have won if it were not for the Pacers choking it away and Jaylen Brown hitting that 3 to go to overtime, and then Tatum was phenomenal in overtime. But they had quite the scare in Game 1. The Celtics have not been great in TD Garden in the last few playoffs in general. They have not been nearly as dominant as you would expect from a team who's been so highly rated and has had a lot of playoff success outside of winning a title, of course, in recent years. They have not been great at home. Pacers, now they have the confidence to feel like they can compete, and I expect them to. Of course, when you have a situation like this with the Pacers, there's 2 ways you could take it. One, now they feel that they can compete, and they're going to be able to compete in this series as a whole. Or 2, excuse me. Oh my God, what a play in this Pirates game! But or 2, they get deflated because they should have won that game. They didn't, and then they go on to lose the next few. But I'm expecting the Pacers to at least compete in this one again. I don't think they're going to get blown out. The Celtics, maybe they do win, but I think it's going to be a closer game again. Moving on here. Second pick, we got Pacers and Celtics under 224. This is just way, way, way too high for the playoffs here, 224. These are juiced up because we've seen all the regular season games. We saw a last game where it went to like 260 because they went to overtime. This is 2 offensive teams, but I expect them both to slow down because they're both going to have some adjustments in the second game here. This is hit in 4 of the last 6 Pacers games. This is hit in 10 straight Celtics games prior to game 1 of this series. I love this bet. I think we see a way, way too high line. I think a lot of people are still going to take the over on this, but I'm going to go under 224.5 for this game. Moving on here to Jason Tatum, under 30.5 points. Tatum was not great last game, but he went off in OT to cover his line, which I'm not sure what it was. I think probably 29. I take it. He got like 36 and had like 10 or 12 in OT. But he went over in 3 of the past 4, boosting up this line, but he went under in the previous 7 games prior to that, or prior to this 4-game stretch where he's gotten 3 of them. I expect Indiana to adjust to him, especially after the way he went off in the overtime. He was not great in the fourth quarter at all, and we would be looking at the series and team and player a whole lot different had overtime not happened. I think Tatum's being a bit overvalued at 30.5, and I think he goes under. And we see maybe I'm not going to bet Jaylen Brown, but I think Jaylen Brown will have a good game tonight. Let's see here. Moving on. Miles Turner over 16.5 points. This is covered in 9 to 14 playoff games for Miles Turner. He took heavy advantage of the Celtics' just lack of rim protection without Porzingis. And the bigs in general this playoffs have just been great against Boston since Porzingis got hurt. Not a ton of rim protection down there. Al Horford is not that rim protector you need him to be. Neither is Luke Kornet. So I really, really like the bigs for all the teams that are playing the Celtics to have good games. Moving on here with number 5, my last NBA pick for this game. Nembhard over 4.5 assists. This is hit in 7 of 11 playoff games. The 4 games that it didn't hit, it was at 4. He had 4 assists on 4.5. Nembhard just had the ball in his hands a lot in these playoffs. This is wildly consistent. If it was 3.5, he would have hit it in all 11 playoff games, which is just super impressive. He's had the ball in his hands a ton in the playoffs, and he's been effective when doing so. So I like Nembhard over 4.5 assists here for sure. Moving on here. Stars, money line in the NHL. One more time. Let me go over the NBA ones just before I get into this. But Pacers plus 9.5. Celtics Pacers under 224.5. Tatum under 30.5. Miles Turner over 16.5. Nembhard over 4.5 assists. Okay. Let's go with Stars money line. They won 2 of the 3 games against the Oilers in the regular season. That one Oilers win was in OT against the Stars. The Stars have a ton of rest going into this game due to finishing their series a lot easier. The Oilers were in an absolute dogfight with the Canucks for 7 games. This game is in Dallas, so the Stars are going to have that advantage as well. And I know they're semi-heavy favorites, and I don't know how that's not a strike for Skeens, but I know there's somewhat heavy favorites in this game, but I think they lock this one down. I think they're a more consistent, sound team. The Oilers can be a highlight team. They can put up a ton of goals, but the Stars have just been consistent all year in this entire playoffs, and I just trust them more at the end of the day. So, Stars money line in the one NHL game here. I'm going to try to limit my NHL picks. We know I haven't been great this playoffs, or at least since I started this show. I was pretty decent in the NHL playoffs prior to starting this show. This is week 3 of the show right now. We're on Thursday, so prior to the start of the show, I was betting fine, but once the show started, I just lost in the NHL. But regardless, next bet here, my sole WNBA bet, Mercury minus 6.5. This line is moving more and more towards the Mercury. It started at 4.5. I think it's up to close to 7.5 now. The Mercury had a very convincing win in Vegas against the 2-time defending champ Aces a couple days ago. The Mystics, who they're playing, are not horrible, but they did lose to by like 9 or 10 to a bad Storm team. They have not won a game yet this year. I just think the Mercury are a much better team. I think they're a better team without Brittany Griner, and minus 6.5, I'm going to take that all day. I think they blow out the Storm here. But moving on here to next pick. Skeens gives up a hit, sadly. But MLB. We got 3 MLB picks before we get up out of here and give you the 3 best bets out of these 10. But Blue Jays, Tigers over 7.5 runs. Gossman is on the mound for the Blue Jays. He's had an underwhelming season so far with a pretty high ERA. Flaherty for the Tigers. He's been solid, but nothing too special. Both teams have been better in the run scoring department recently. This is just a really low over-under due to bad overall stats on offense between these 2 teams. But like I said, they've been better recently. And I think this game goes over 7.5. All right. Moving on here. Orioles, White Sox, under 8.5. I know the graphic on the YouTube screen just says Sox. Meant to put White Sox, but you get the gist. Orioles, White Sox, under 8.5. White Sox do not score many runs, much due to injury and not their own fault, but also the team isn't built too great. They do not score a ton of runs. Grayson Rodriguez has been phenomenal. He's 4-1, 3.15 ERA. He's been great. I could see this being like a 5-2, 6-2, 5-3 game, somewhere in that range, covering this under 8.5 for us. Then my last one here, Rockies A's over 7.5. This is covered in 5 of the 6 A's past games, covered in 6 of the last 8 Rockies games. 2 bad pitchers on the mound between these two teams. Feltner for the Rockies, he's 1-4 with a mid-5s ERA. Estes for the A's, he's only had 2 starts, but he's 1-1 with an 11 ERA. He has not been great for them. I think both teams are going to score a lot of runs in this game. I think they scored these runs early. I expect the Rockies to win, but it could go either way in this one, and I love over 7.5. So, to recap, I'll go over my 10 picks one more time, and then I'll give my 3. Pacers plus 9.5 in the NBA. In the NBA, Pacers plus 9.5. Celtics Pacers under 224.5. Tatum over 30.5. Miles Turner over 16.5. And Nembhard over 4.5 assists. In the NHL, just one bet, Stars money line. In the WNBA, just one bet, Mercury minus 6.5. In the MLB, 3 bets, Blue Jays Tigers over 7.5. Orioles White Sox under 8.5. And Rockies A's over 7.5. So, moving on to giving my 3 best bets here. If anybody's new to the show, I picked these on the show. I picked the 10 prior, of course, so I know what I'm going to talk about. But on the show is where I pick my favorite 3. First one I'm going to go with is, let's go with Nembhard over 4.5 assists. This is my favorite bet of the day. Like I said, covered in 7 of 11 playoff games, and the 4 he didn't get, he was a half point under. He's had the ball in his hands a ton. I think he's going to continue to cover this for us, and we can trust him, especially at minus 105. I expected when I was looking at the numbers for these guys in the assist department that he was going to have a line of like 5.5. We got him at 4.5. I love that there. And let's move on now to the second one. I'm going to go with the game we just talked about. The game we just talked about, Rockies A's over 7.5. 5 of the last 6 A's games, 6 of the last 8 Rockies games, 2 bad pitchers, 2 teams that aren't very good overall, but when they play each other, they've seemed to have been scoring a lot of runs. And I trust that we can get a lot of runs in this game. We took the under the other day, we took the Rockies. We took the Rockies money line, and the A's ended up coming back and winning. These teams are scoring runs this series. I like them to go over 7.5 here. Once again, expected this line to be like 8.5. So we'll take 7.5. Good outing for Skeens, by the way. Oh, a little behind the scenes. I'd go at night the night before and I start making notes for these picks. And I had Pirates minus 1.5. Didn't realize that the game started an hour and a half before we start the show, so I had to scramble and put the Rockies pick in here. But I ended up taking it as one of my best bets. I don't think I was going to take the Pirates minus 1.5, even though they are currently covering, but we'll see. Last bet here. Let's go with Celtics Pacers under 224.5. This over-under is just way too high. Like I said, it's super inflated. You don't see over-unders this high in the playoffs for a reason. Defense is usually what prevails. Game 1, we saw both teams make a ton of shots, and they went to OT. That's great. Juices up the line. Game 2, we're going to see a lot of adjustments on both sides. Should not expect these teams to play as well on offense as they have so far in their season series and then last game. So I'm taking under 224.5. So once again, to recap the best bets, Celtics Pacers under 224.5. Nembhard over 4.5 assists, and Rockies A's over 7.5. So that's the show for the day. Once again, shout out to Bet Openly for sponsoring the show. Sign up with Bet Openly, deposit $50. DM me proof at JReedNBA on Twitter. That's JREIDNBA on Twitter, and I will enter you into a giveaway for some cash. Shout out to Bet Openly, the best odds in the game. We will be back tomorrow, same time, 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, with 10 more picks, cutting it down to 3 more best